Welcome to 8 Cubes. I'm Cam Best, he's Lamby Series, and we're going to be covering the 8 most important topics in Marvel Snap, starting with the card coming out on Tuesday, Moonstone, a 4/6 with an ongoing ability that doubles the ongoing abilities of every other 1, 2, or 3 cost ongoing card you have at Moonstone's location. What is your first instinct upon seeing this card, Lamby? Because my first instinct is, wow, there's no good targets for this, and then wow, Victoria Hand just came out and it's an amazing target for this. For the entire time this card was being previewed, I was like, oh, I don't get this card. I think it sucks. Now that I've played with Victoria Hand, I'm like, I could really use 2 Victoria Hands.
Well, there's also another thing in which this is the first time that Ant-Man could be better than Hydra Bob, if you think about it that way.
That is
Right?
like,
It's huge,
that's a
actually.
big guy. That's 9 power. That's
right.
Okay, Dazzler.
Right.
Okay, Patriot. Okay.
Yeah. The Patriot one is also very interesting because that one has the biggest impact, right? Like, you remember how there was a period we used to do the whole Patriot Ultron thing after Ultron got buffed?
Yeah.
Now it's like, it's one of those decks that does the simplicity thing as well. Like, you just play less cards, but they are super high impact, right? You go Patriot, then you do this, and you just do whatever, and then Ultron, bam. You know how big your not Doom bot, sorry. Your whatever, what are they called?
The Ultron bots are gonna be bigger than Doom bots if you have 2 Patriots.
Yeah, you know how big your bots are if you just play 3, 4, whatever, and then 6. That's kind of interesting, actually. And also, yes, once again, back to the fact that Ant-Man is a 1/9 now.
Yeah.
Is it 1/9? 1/9, yeah.
I think it's interesting because this card just sort of screams Enchantress me. Like, because not only are you playing this card, Moonstone, but you are also playing all of your good ongoings in the Moonstone lane.
Place,
that is like the premise of it. She's basically like a giant neon sign.
Whatever, right?
Enchantress me. And so I wonder how much any of this like really sticks. But when I first saw this season, I was like, that's like the worst card in the season. And now having played Victoria Hand, I can see a world where she actually makes sense. I'm not a huge believer in the Ant-Man Patriot stuff, but I will give you this one. I wasn't a huge believer last episode in the Hood Victoria Hand stuff, and you were right about that. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to sit down and listen. Tell me why Ant-Man Patriot makes sense and won't just get, like, ruthlessly obliterated by the Cardaliath.
I mean, it will. It will. It's just, it will. When I mentioned it just now, I was just thinking like, wow, this thing scales in power so hard, but this thing also gets mega countered so hard, right? So I feel like it's one of those scenarios whereby, if you do Patriot, Moonstone, and then you look at your opponent, they look at you. You didn't snap me yet. All right, you lose. It's like it's one of those things, right? Like, you show it to them, like, I'm gonna plant about 30 power on turn 6. You haven't snapped me yet, alright, I guess you don't have it. Yeah. It's one of those things, right?
Yeah, it is just like, it's kind of hard for a deck like that to ever end up being the best deck. It's not hard for a deck like that to end up playable, but it's extremely hard for a deck that is doing something that linear and clearly counterable to ever be the best deck, because, like, not only is it like, I'm gonna die to Enchantress, I'm gonna die to Goliath, it's also like, I'm gonna die to Invisible Woman Killmonger. Like, it's like a bunch of stuff where if there is ever a deck like that with a big enough target on its back, you kind of just end up getting hated out of the metagame. Pretty similar to Zoo, actually, where it's like, this probably can't ever be the best deck because of how good the counterplay to it is. And I think that that is probably a good place to put a lot of power. Honestly, though, with Moonstone, it's like, I don't know if it has enough power. Like, I don't know if it's doing enough to justify itself, even though the numbers are really good, because of how powerful Enchantress is against it.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, right? Like, it's at least a little bit on par per se, because like, if you're Enchantressing this thing, you are going like Enchantress versus a 4/6. You know, it's still sort of like 1v1. It's not like you Enchantress this and it's just like a pointless card on the board. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah. That brings us to Victoria Hand, who is, in my opinion, like, I strongly suspect that if Moonstone sees play, a lot of it will be with Victoria Hand. So I think it's worth starting there in that context, where if you are looking to pick up Moonstone, I think it is on the short list of things that are probably going to go with Victoria Hand. Or Victoria Hand is on the short list of things that are probably going to go with Moonstone. That said, I've been playing plenty of decks where the goal is to duplicate Victoria Hands, whether by Frigga or Nico copy, because the second Victoria Hand is so much better than the first Victoria Hand because the second Victoria Hand gets the buff. That is not happening when you Moonstone it, but +4 power to all your created cards turns your Kate Bishop into a factory of just like the biggest dudes on Earth. Like, you are just making large dudes. Your grapple arrow is going to be 7 power. Your Pim arrow is going to be 8 power. That's a bunch. But again, we have the weakness to Invisible Woman Killmonger. Again, we have the weakness to Enchantress. And I worry that a deck like this, while it will have a powerful points package, will also be the kind of thing that is relatively easier to try to beat.
Yeah, but having said that though, like since we talked about like I guess we should talk about Moonstone and Victoria Hand as like similar in the same thing vein right now, because I think they both really do work hand in hand, right? But
Nice
I guess
pun.
what we talk
You didn't mean that pun on purpose, but that was really good.
I
Hand
still
in
have
hand.
no idea what I just said. What
You
did I
said
just
they
say?
said you said they work
hand in hand.
hand.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
I might be a natural.
You
I mean,
cooked.
I've done this a few times
You
already.
cooked,
Okay,
man.
but anyway, yeah. So Moonstone and Victoria Hand, right? So I think at least this combination of cards and the packages that work with Moonstone and Victoria Hand and Moonstone packages are a bit less painful to get Enchantress versus, right? Like at least these are cards with actual stats. Like the whole thing we mentioned earlier with the whole Ultron and Patriot is just the most vulnerable and weak if it does get Enchantress. At least for this one, you get to play stuff on board, which you would have done it normally with Victoria Hand anyway, and now you're just adding a Moonstone on turn 4. I guess the sacrifice is just thinking along the lines of like, if this Moonstone gets Enchantress, what was I doing anything better on turn 4 than playing the Moonstone? Which, I mean, sometimes yes, for sure. But you know, I do think that the fact that Moonstone is 4/6 is it's a very big saving grace when you're not going all in on just pure ongoing synergies, you know. Because like the Victoria Hand that also has I mean the hood is huge, right? It's a 1/6 still regardless. And then there's also, I mean, at the end of the day, this version of the deck has more mid-rangey stuff and less about all in on one big bombshell. So I think it could work out.
I just thought of your Moonstone nut draw, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
You play Patriot, then Moonstone, then Mystique the Moonstone, then play Ultron.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, it's really, if you don't have Enchantress, you insta lose.
Or Goliath.
Oh yeah, but like it's one of those situations whereby you know how to just get out. It's super easy to get out, right?
Yeah.
Because even if they don't want to snap you and they want to be like, okay, I think I'm just gonna take like 2 cubes. I mean, the whole power level of the whole play is so big. You're just gonna give them the 2 cubes, like whatever, man.
It's like a Mr. Negative type deck where it's like, all right, you did the thing.
That's
guess
so
I die.
That's so easy to set up, right?
Yeah, it is a little bit easier, I suppose. But in terms of Victoria Hand, I think she's strong, but I also think she's narrow. Where we've seen strong but narrow cards show up a lot in Marvel Snap, but they don't necessarily have staying power unless their deck does. So when you pick up Victoria Hand, unlike the card we're about to talk about next, consider it a referendum on her archetype. Because you can't play, I think from this point going forward, you're probably not playing any Victoria Hand deck with a budget replacement for Victoria Hand because it doesn't exist. But unless that deck ends up being elite of the elite, it's not necessarily going to be a card that you're going to be super mad about missing. Right now, it certainly feels like the elite of the elite. But we've had cards that have felt like that before and then sort of fallen off a little bit. Galacta, I think, is a great example, where this is a card that everyone was like, oh my god, this is ridiculous, and right now, I think you'd be very hard-pressed to find a single person who thinks she's a problem at all. And I think that we have seen that happen before.
Yeah, I think what you mean by narrow in general is just basically like the card is teetering on. It's good, but the moment there's a shift in anything, it's difficult to fit the same card in the same space and think it's still good enough, right?
It is the kind of card where I personally think it's quite good. But because I can't see the future, I definitely can't guarantee that it'll remain to be good.
Yeah, fair point.
Unlike this guy, this might be like the easiest purchase ever. This guy's awesome. He's ridiculously strong. He is in every mid-range deck. He is the king of mid-range, the god of the soup bowl that is every mid-range deck right now. Iron Patriot is a 2/3 that gives you a card and maybe cheats 4 energy on that card. It's just very obviously good. I think the comparison I've seen for it that I like the most is actually like Anti-Venom, where it just is an on-rate body that has the potential to cheat like 4 energy for you. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, that's really good. That's going to go in a lot of stuff. And I think it is a very strong card. It is a meta warping card. It is a potentially nerfable card. I think this card is that strong. I wasn't always on this island, but now I think, thinking about it more, I think you could very easily say Iron Patriot only discounts 3 and the card would still be great.
Yeah, I was actually about to mention a bit about that, because if we talk about the utility and the abilities and like how good this card is, I was just gonna 100% agree, because it's just too convenient, right? Like this card just goes in every mid-range shell. It's so easy to trigger. I think this part we don't really need to explain too much on, because we talked about it for a lot. We just kept saying in previous videos.
Exactly as good as we said he was gonna be.
Like we just kept talking about it in previous videos, and it's so easy to use. One thing I want to mention is that the discount, even if it goes to -3, yes, it's also probably still gonna be insane. So I actually don't think I personally don't want to nerf this card. I really like the card. I don't think it's actually needed to be nerfed per se, because but okay, yes, firstly you get free card random and all that kind of thing. It could be really bad, it could be really good. But I just want to have some just good cards in the deck, in the game, Like it's not this card is not powerful to the point whereby it's an archetype of itself on its own and it's unstoppable. You get what I'm trying to say? It's not like an archetype by itself and it's unstoppable. It's just an addition to the good cards shell, and I think that's totally fine.
But it's also like subsumed them into itself, right? Wiccan is an Iron Patriot deck. Anti-Venom is an Iron Patriot deck. Everything is an Iron Patriot deck. And so, like, yes, it is an addition to the good card shell, but it's an addition to every good card shell. That might be problematic.
Okay, so the question is, do you guys remember 6-9 Chavez? Is this at that level of nerf? No, right? Because that one was a literal deck building thing. But this one is more like, it's just a powerful card.
It is not. It is not near Loki. Right. It is not near Elsa. It is up there. But
so I think this can breathe a bit longer, right?
I agree it can breathe a little longer. But I also think that, like, I would put it somewhere below, let's say, release Anti-Venom. Or release Agent Venom, I should say. Sorry, release Agent Venom.
Okay.
A little below that, maybe above release Surtur. And those are, like, so it's definitely in the range of cards that have gotten hit before, in my opinion.
Okay.
Now we got some news. Originally, we had suspected that Scream and Rocket and Groot's differences were due to Rocket and Groot being bugged and not working with Scream in the face of a Luke Cage. For those who are unaware, Luke Cage, when there is, or a Scream when there is a Luke Cage on the board, will still gain power. A Rocket and Groot when there is a Luke Cage on the board will not. This difference was expressed to Second Dinner, and they came to the conclusion, surprisingly, that the way it should work is actually the way Rocket and Groot works and not the way Scream works. I want to get your thoughts before I give mine. Do you think that makes sense, that Luke Cage is stopping theft?
That's a very interesting question, right? Like you mentioned, the Luke Cage stopping theft. I personally think it's fine though. Like, okay, I might regret saying this, but like, it's really just if they print cards that make Luke Cage even more.
Yeah,
I don't know, man. But
yeah.
I think I mean we have a topic for that further down anyway.
We'll get to that.
I think for now, I think it's totally fine. I personally, I'm just very happy that like Rocket and Groot is a playable card. Like, honestly, like, at the end of the day, it's
very good.
I think it's just better speed right now, straight up.
A little bit. Like, it's just a very good card, even with this interaction staying. And I think my thoughts on it are basically, I personally think that simplicity is core to Marvel Snap. And every time anyone has tried to make the argument that Scream is how it should work, they've used words like insurance, and I think that's too complex. I think that it should be very straightforward. Luke is not insuring you and giving you back the points that Scream stole. The points didn't get stolen, so Scream doesn't get anything. If I steal $50 from you, I don't get those $50 unless you lose $50. And if you don't lose $50, I'm not getting any money. I think that because of the word choice they used, steal, that this is the correct decision.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, right? Like if you didn't actually take it from somebody else, if it doesn't actually move from someone to you, it's technically not taking it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That kind of does make sense, actually.
Like if it was worded differently, if it said, when a card moves, afflict that card with 2 power and Scream gains 2 power, I wouldn't have a problem with it still working. Because that's separate clauses. But if it says steal, 1 clause, if I'm not actually afflicting, I shouldn't be gaining anything.
Actually, coming back to this topic, I realized that now that I've probably realized this for a while already, but the more I think about it, the more I feel like Marvel Snap has so many different types of wording. Like the wording on so many cards could just be changed to be a bit more similar. You know, when you play TCGs, they try and standardize wording for so many things just because. Marvel Snap feels like every time they want to make the card sound cooler, they just make it sound like a cooler word. Like they use steal
that's good.
instead of just add or like Hulk out, exactly. Like they just want to make the card cooler sounding, right? But at the end of the day, most TCGs they standardize their wording, and I think Marvel Snap could do a bit better.
I 100% disagree. I think that words like Hulk out are cool as hell. I think that things working the way they say on the card is way cooler than like the Magic the Gathering implementation of this, which would absolutely like be like put 2 -1/-1 counters on the card, put 2 +1/+1 counters on your card. Like it would absolutely be very mechanical and rote. And I feel like that's a barrier that I've had to overcome when trying to explain Magic the Gathering to someone. It's often been like, that's a lot of words to say something that intuitively is pretty simple. And so using less words to say that thing, even if it comes at a cost like this, I think is right.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense, right? Because I guess I was looking at it from a perspective of like TCGs, you know, like TCGs, they all standardize stuff. But I guess Marvel Snap's a bit different.
Well, like you're a pro gamer. You love being able to like read text and understand all the nuances of it. Because that's where the edges are, right? But I would want this game to be explainable to an 8-year-old. It's the superhero game. Like I feel like that matters. I feel like that's really important, actually.
That's true. All right, let's just keep hulking out then.
Hulk out, baby. I can't count the amount of times I've written Luke Cage in the topic section, and I hate that I have to keep bringing him up, but they just made him even more relevant because now he counters Scream too. Yay! Like, there is an intense frustration I have with Luke Cage being the all-or-nothing answer and helper to everything that exists in the Afflict space. You want to beat Scream, you play Luke Cage. You want to beat Ajax, you play a Luke Cage. You want to use Anti-Venom, you play a Luke Cage. You want to beat Man-Thing, you play a Luke Cage. You want to beat US Agent, you play a Luke Cage. It does too much. There should be more cards in that space, but they can't make more cards in that space because how would you possibly make a card that is better at doing what it does than Luke Cage? What are you supposed to do? Like, he does everything that space could ask of him. Period. There is nothing you could ask Luke Cage to do that he does not already do. And yet, he is constantly getting stuff added to his functionality. You want a card that beats Valkyrie? You got it. You want a card that makes you win Quantum Realm? You got it. You want a card that makes you win all of the negative power locations? You got it. It does all of that stuff too. For no reason. It beats Cassandra Nova. It beats Scorpion. There's 75 cards or something. Like just so many cards that interact with this. And it just does all of them. It is all or nothing. You have Luke Cage and the card didn't matter.
Yeah, I think the thing about Luke Cage and why it's constantly we constantly mention it also is because it's like really so one of a kind, correct? Like when this all-encompassing effect, 3 location affecting effect. Technically, the only one that's like this is Mobius, right? Mobius is like the only other one that does this kind of thing. So maybe global effects are not correct in Marvel Snap because it hits too many things. It limits the design space of like future cards. You know, when I say global effects, I mean just cards that affect everything at one shot. So Luke Cage, Mobius. And I mean, at the end of the day, we are complaining about Luke Cage now, but I think maybe in the future there'll be a time that we will complain about Mobius again.
Yeah.
Because it's a similar style of effect, right? It limits the way you can print new cards because this card already does everything. But everything in the space of like changing costs is done. Like Luke Cage is there, it's done. Anything in the way of like Mobius saying like your cards don't get discounted is also done because Mobius exists. So maybe we need to change these cards. But I think you only change these cards when you are already prepared to print cards that do similar things, but like only on one location.
But like you can't do that, right? Imagine the uproar if they nerf Luke Cage and then tried to sell you Luke Cage 2.
True.
Like, I would be mad. And I'm usually
is this one of those scenarios where because they made Galactus exist so now people know of the power of said card, they cannot like reduce its power and then create a V2 or something like that?
I wonder. Like, I really do wonder, where it's just like, I don't know how they solve this, and I don't envy the people that have to.
Yeah, it's hard.
This is a PSA that while everyone is freaking out about Iron Patriot, move bounce is still really damn strong. Like, there is a ton of power in this deck list. It is still, in my opinion, underplayed. Maybe because Madam Web crashes the game half the time. But this is still a deck that is 100% elite that I do not see enough of. And I understand, we got like a world where the new hotness is this Iron Patriot stuff. But you know what Iron Patriot Victoria hand decks love doing? They love playing 12 cards onto the board. They love it so much. Do you know what card loves to see a full board? Dagger.
Yeah.
Dagger in 2 moves is going to win you a lane. It just is. It's just too much stuff. Like, you are in a very good spot positioning-wise if you're a move bounce gamer right now. There are less people playing Red Guardian because they're all trying to do various Iron Patriot stuff. It's not gone, but there's less. And guess who loves seeing that? Madam Web. Like, this is a clearly powerful deck that honestly I think got better positioned, that is just not seeing enough play.
I mean, it's not seeing enough play for the same reasons as the past, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so firstly, yes, people want to try a new card. But it's also not seeing enough play because the deck is generally not something that's easy to play to begin with. I mean, like, the base... I did mention in the previous video that it's trickling down a little bit, whereby people not just in the top 50 are playing it, like the hundreds and thousands are also obviously playing it. But to play at a certain level, I think you really do need a lot of time and time investment and understanding of the game and the meta, which constantly shifts, right? Like, you remember, you literally just said it. So like now people are playing less Red Guardian, so move bounce players, when they get snapped on, they can maybe eliminate the fact that it could be Red Guardian, for example, because they might be getting snapped on other things, right? Less people are playing Red Guardian.
I don't know,
that kind of thing.
I would actually still expect Red Guardian, because frankly, if you're snapping into a Madam Web, that better be a Red Guardian. I don't know what else it could be.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I'm just saying that, like, understanding the counters to move bounce and where the meta shifts is very relevant to a deck like move bounce, which is like a fine-tuned machine whereby all your plays and decisions have to be made based on what is very relevant in the game. Like, you need to know what people are doing so you can make the right point allocations in said spots, the right moves in said spots, So it's the kind of deck where that you need to be a student of the game, a master and student of the game at the same time. So there's so much effort. It's so much effort, really. It's just so much effort. But obviously, if you are really just like big rank, like rank go up equals good in life, like obviously you want to play move bounce because your rank will go up if you are a student of this game.
I have a couple of OTA wishes, and I don't know if they're good wishes. I'm gonna throw one at you. Let's start this off. I think Pixie should be a 2/3. And the reason I think this is because I want to promote people playing Mobius in a world where he's pretty lackluster. I think Mobius is not necessarily good enough on his own, and I want to make more people be invested in the experience of playing Mobius. Hopefully by doing that, we can get more people doing Mobius stuff a la Mobius Mirrors, and thus bring the metagame a little bit more full circle.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it just one funny way of saying so people can forget a bit about Luke Cage? Like, let's think about the
I
next
know,
global
yeah.
card. No, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really solve anything. I feel it just changes. It just, I mean, yes, it's a change. It just changes the meta from like a more Luke Cagey meta to a more Mobius meta
But that's
potentially.
good. Like, because
I mean,
okay,
it's a
let's
change,
say
yes.
let's say you cut Luke Cage from your mid-range deck to play Mobius. Suddenly you're way more
Yeah.
vulnerable to the Ajax deck. Like, there's cycling that can happen then.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so for what it's worth, I don't think it's wrong. I think at the end of the day, Pixie can be a 2/3 for sure. Like even if they just do 2/2, I think it's I do think it's on borderline negligible. Like you wouldn't be playing more Pixie just because she's a 2/3. Personally, I don't
I
think
think you
so.
might. Okay, okay, let's go a little
There has
weirder.
to be a deck for it, like a
Let's
legit good deck for
let's
it.
get a little weirder. All right?
Okay, okay.
Pixie 1/1.
Okay, that's a bit strong. Like the fact that you can play it one turn earlier is more
Okay.
impactful than it's a 2/3, I'm pretty
Sure.
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 But
Okay.
yeah,
Uh
okay.
I've got one more pitch.
Let's
Luke
hear it.
Cage to 3/1.
Ooh, I like this one. I like this one. I like this one. I like a lot simply because okay, but I like and at the same time I do think if you do this, then you need to potentially consider Mobius to potentially in the future be a 3/1 also. Because at the end of the day, it's based on like if it was a Mobius meta, people would be saying, yeah, Mobius at
Yes.
3/1 instead. But now it's a Luke Cage meta, so Luke Cage at 3/1. But firstly, I think I like this a lot, and I want to address this because I don't know why I didn't think about this, but like yeah, I just wanna say this because I feel like with these kind of universally good cards need to feel like there's a drawback to play them, right? Like you need to feel a little bit of pain playing them on the board because like just playing a Luke Cage stops like you mentioned earlier, 75 cards from working against you, right? You need to feel a bit of pain from stopping 75 cards from working against you, which is usually in Marvel Snap's life and history, it's always about making the card a bit less powerful to just play onto the board, which maybe 3/1 a bit harsh. I think 3/2 you already feel less people playing the card like 3/2. 3/1 seems a bit very bad in Marvel Snap's context where you
So
only have 6 turns.
I was aiming to do something specific with 3/1,
Okay.
which is make it really hard to not get Red Guardian if you're playing Luke Cage. That was
That
sort of where
makes
I was
sense.
going with that. Like, if you wanted to do 2/1, whatever, I think that's fine. Like, the point is, I want there to be extremely clear counterplay where it's like, all right, if you play your Luke Cage early to prevent my Scream or Rocketing Groot or whatever, I'm going to get you later, right? Like, I want there to be that give and take of that. Like, if we're going to
Okay.
give Luke Cage the ability to beat Scream 2, I want there to be some risk to playing him. And right now at 3, like every one drop that isn't Hydra Bob has 2 power. He and
True.
can protect him from Red Guardian, and I hate that. I mean, I like it when I'm playing
Alright.
Luke Cage, but I don't think that's like a good thing. I think that there should be whatever it is. I think he should be like sort of a clear Red Guardian target, basically.
I feel like the only thing I want to add here is that in maybe a few months, maybe a year from now, when we come back and look at this again, we'll be like, oh, remember the time we complained about Luke Cage being global?
Yeah.
Now we are complaining about Mobius being global. He's back.
Yes.
It's just another. I mean, these two are effectively the same thing. They do different things,
Yes.
but they have the same style, So
Yeah.
I like this whole. I like the fact that this episode we address the fact that global effects that affect everything really limit design space, and I think that might be an ongoing theme here.
I think it's time for a little bit of a victory lap. I think both of us said this about Doom 2099, which is like, this card is good, but it's not worth freaking out about. And
Yeah.
right now, we live in the world where it's just not worth freaking out about. Like, I feel like there's this thing that happens with new cards almost where it's like, until people figure out what to do about them and understand their range, they release much stronger than they end up staying. Like, these cards come out and you don't really know what the best way to attack them is, and you get run over and you're like, that's busted. But 3 weeks later, everyone kind of gets it with Doom 2099. You can Lady Deathstrike them, you can US Agent them. There's a bunch of stuff you can do to the deck that makes it really, really bad, and it makes it sort of hard to snap on. You can try to outpower them because they're a little bit predictable. They don't really have good ways of preventing you from playing a lot of cards. Their matchups are very polarized. I personally think that this should be sort of taken into account when evaluating any new card. And I've been trying to take that into account. I hope you saw some of that thought process applied to Victoria hand, where it's like, I go into this thinking, how do we make sure this card is not being overhyped? How do we make sure that it isn't just people who aren't used to this card that are getting run over right now? How am I sure about that? And the answer a lot of times is I'm not sure about that, and I do have to introduce that element of doubt. And I feel like that's what I learned from Doom 2099.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. I wanted to address the thing whereby Doom 2099 is something that I never felt really needed enough, because when we talk about Doom 2099 being a strong card, obviously it's a lot of stats, but predictability and inflexibility, right? Doom 2099 style decks really need to be played in like one specific way for you to get maximum mileage out of Doom 2099. And the maximum mileage way of playing Doom 2099 is a very inflexible way as well. You literally just play one card a turn. You kind of can count it. You kind of can know roughly what's their max output. You just know if you lost, you can leave. If you can beat it, you stay, you snap. Like, it's very obvious. It's very face up, you know. But okay, so the one thing I want to talk about is also that I know I say that, okay, you don't really need to know these kind of things, but Hela back then was also very obvious, very predictable. But I guess the reason why that needed a nerf was because it was a burst of uninteractable stats.
Yeah, it was just bigger. Like, the numbers
so
were
it's
just
too big.
bigger.
It's predictable, but it's too big.
Yeah.
Right? So that was Hela's problem.
Like, the issue with Hela is the same issue that Move Bounce has more than Doom 2099. Like, it's just wholly unaccountable, incredibly large numbers that any deck with a semblance of a curve can't do anything about. Like, oh, I played my 4-6 or whatever. Literally irrelevant. None of what you did actually mattered. And like, that's the Move Bounce problem. That was the Hela problem as well. I tend to think that with Doom 2099, it's not as high up as that. You're going very wide, but you're not going very tall. And that means that there's more available counterplay for your opponent. Where with Hela, it was just like, I don't know, here's 50 power final turn. Go nuts. And it's like that. Those numbers are not numbers that a mid-range deck can compete with. But Doom 2099 being on the board and progressive, I think, does allow it to do that. That said, I do want a little asterisk here. All the stuff we've said about predictability, that's stuff that applies at the top level of Infinite. I would not be surprised if, because this card is so easy to play, it ends up a nerf target anyway, because unlike other cards that are hard to play, you always get max value out of Doom 2099 if you can read.
If you can read.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean it's true, right? Like, I've been in scenarios whereby I've noticed people just give me 8 cubes even though they didn't see the writing on the wall with Doom 2099.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just like, I guess just people, okay, it's back to the point where people like to just stay. But at the end of the day, Doom 2099 is kind of a very predictable card. If you bother to like think about leaving even a bit, you realize that actually, yeah, I'm just gonna lose to this thing. It's just there. So
yeah, but like, I do think like it is worth noting, there are a lot of people that will just probably lose to a card like that. Like, this is the kind of card where it's the opposite of the Move Bounce problem. Where it's like, with Move Bounce, there's all this stuff you have to know. With Doom 2099, the bar is, are you literate? It's a low bar.
I mean, card game players a lot of the time don't read. I attest to that, right? I'm pretty sure I don't read most.
It's not the lowest bar in the world, but it is a lower bar than a lot of other stuff.
Very true.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching this episode of 8 Cubes. As always, I've been Cam Best. He's Lamby Series, and he's going to take us out.
All right, see you guys, and I hope to see you guys real soon. Like, comment, and subscribe. All right, bye, guys.